Hi guys, James at RampantLionReviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one we are going to head up to Norway, and it's my first Norwegian beer that I've filmed for you in quite a wee while actually. So we're going to go to Grimstad, which is a little bit to the southwest of Oslo, the capital city, and we're revisiting a brewery that for a period of time were kind of the premier craft brewery of Norway. So we're going to go and taste another beer from Nøgne Ø, or the Naked Island Brewery as it would translate into English, and this particular beer is called the Highland Diet. Now this beer was sold in Sweden through Systembolaget simply as Highland, and they put this little dot over the diet when they put these beers into the Systembolaget stores, and I'm not sure what the exact logic of that is. Were Systembolaget afraid of kind of discriminating against fat people, or did they not want to suggest that beer should be part of the Swedish diet? I mean, you know, I do know that the Swedes like their alcohol, there's no debating that really, but I just thought it was quite unusual that they changed the name of this beer before putting it out there. Or maybe they didn't want to offend Scottish people, but I can tell as a Scot, you know, I don't really give a shit. But you can actually see on the back here as well, they've the Systembolaget staff have obviously had to get the black markers out and score out the word diet in this beer, so really not sure what to make of that. But this particular beer, they're describing it as a Scottish mild ale, and it comes in at 4.5% ABV. This was one that actually won the Norwegian National Homebrewing Championship in 2018. It was Andreas Hugfeldt that brewed this beer, and he got to go to Nøgne Ø and brew it on the big scale as part of his prize, in fact. What I will say about this is that I have, as a Scot, I have never heard of this style, Scottish mild ale. I've never heard of an explicit beer style as a Scottish mild ale. It could be something akin to like a 40, a 50, or maybe even a 60 shilling, but I've never heard of an explicit beer style called the Scottish mild ale. But we'll talk about that a little bit more when we actually taste the beer itself. But really curious to see how this one turns out, and as always I hope you guys enjoy my take on this beer. So anyway, as is usual with my reviews then, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Nøgne Ø before. No doubt we'll add some more in the fairly near future. There's all the usual social media. If you want to see more beer reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel of course has a geography based tagging system, so you can go into the home page and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, prefecture, whatever it is you're interested in. Do check out the playlist of beers from different countries. There is one there for all the Norwegian beers that I've reviewed for you before, and that's being added to whenever I get the opportunity. And as always, please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is hugely appreciated. The little black sticker sticking to my hands for this one. But yeah, to tell you a little bit about the brewery then, on to my brewery notes. So Nøgne Ø was founded back in 2002 by Gunnar Vig and Kjetil Jikken, and they're based in Grimstad, as I mentioned earlier, in Norway, which is in Aust-Agder county in the Sørlandet region in southern Norway, a little bit to the southwest of the capital city Oslo. So this is a little maritime town that's split amongst many different islands which are called Skjærgård, and it only has a population of around 21,000 people. But we do know that Norway is quite a sparsely populated country. It's quite big territorially, but they've only got somewhere in the region of like 4.8 million people, if memory serves correctly. They're a little bit smaller than my homeland of Scotland. But Nøgne Ø, the name itself actually means naked isle if you translate it into English, and it comes from Old Danish, and it was chosen from a well-known 19th century poem called Terje Vegen by Henrik Ibsen, who used to work for some time in Grimstad as an apprentice pharmacist. But Gunnar and Kjetil originally were home brewers, and they decided to start brewing beer on a larger scale because of the lack of diversity of beer that there was in Norway at that time. Apparently 98% of the market in Norway was just dominated by the kind of macro lagers when they were starting out. But they started off back in 2003 with a capacity of around 300 hectolitres, and for a number of years they existed without paid employees, and people were quite happy to come to Norway and volunteer themselves at the brewery. But nowadays they've got a diverse staff over there from Norway, Sweden, Malaysia, Burma, Canada and America, so kind of interesting that actually. But they also boasted the title of being Europe's first sake brewery as well, and apparently all the sake was brewed using the Yamahai method, which if I remember correctly comes from the Tohoku region in northern Japan, the northern part of Honshu. And they were using Grimstad rice from Hokkaido in Norway as well. But they had 5 different products in this range, and the symbol was basically the same as the beer, but the sakes were sold under the name Hadakajima, which literally translates from Japanese into English as Naked Island. In 2013 though, Hansabori, one of the big breweries in Norway, bought a share of the brewery. They bought 55% of the shares, and they've been building the capacity and exports of the brewery ever since. Ketil Yikin actually owns a brewery now in Greece, on Crete, and I forget the name of it, but I have reviewed a good couple of their beers, which are really nice. But on the website they've got beer and sake blogs where you can keep up to date with all the latest goings on. From what I understand, the sake brewing stopped back in late 2018, and they are just focusing on the beer production now, and you can get these beers fairly widely in different supermarkets across Europe. In Marks and Spencer's back in Scotland, you can get the Nøgne Ø beers quite widely, but they used to be considered one of the, they were kind of the premier craft beer company from Norway for a good number of years. So yeah, an interesting company, this one that sold out to one of the big boys after a little while, but it seems to be the case now that Amundsen Brewery are have taken up the mantle of Nøgne Ø, if you like, and Nøgne Ø were, I guess, kind of like the brewdog of Norway. They kind of paved the way for a lot of the other little breweries that came very soon after. So an interesting company, this one. A little bit about this beer itself. As I mentioned at the start of the video, this beer was the creation of Andreas Høgfeldt, who won the 2018 Home Brewing Championship in Norway, and then he got to go to Grimstad and brew his beer at Nøgne Ø as part of his prize. So yeah, that's all you really need to know about the brewery and this beer. Let's get on to the actual tasting of this one then, and just see how we get on. So when I saw this beer in Systembolaget, I just had to get this because being a Scot and seeing the Scottish flag in a beer, it's a little bit like a kind of challenge accepted moment. It gets your heart going a little bit. But you can see there is the standard Nøgne Ø bottle cap on this one. It says on the side here, the mild ale was the most popular beer style in the UK up until the 60s. Mild ales are malt driven, balanced and are sessionable. Homebrewer Andreas Høgfeldt won the 2018 National Championship with Highland diet and got to brew it at Nøgne Ø as part of his prize. So yeah, interesting one that. Like I say, I don't think mild ales would be... As I said at the start of the video, I have never ever heard of a specific beer style called the Scottish mild ale. The mild ale is an English beer style. This might be somewhat similar to like a 40 or a 50 shilling, and maybe he's used some kind of Scottish malt in this one, I'm not quite sure. But I've never heard of a Scottish mild ale. It's, and I know Scotch ales quite well, I have to say. But yeah, we'll try it and we'll see how we get on with this one. I do like the artwork on it, obviously. But yeah, let's get this guy out and we'll get on with the tasting then. So yeah, as you can see, nice little bit of smoky opening on this one, and we'll get it out and into the glass. So yeah, in my experience, one thing I will say about the mild ales is that the English milds tend to be a little bit darker than this, in my opinion. This beer does actually have the colour that you would expect from a Scotch ale. So mild ales, in my opinion, are usually very kind of dark and ebony coloured. This to me is more of like a very, very dark mahogany, rosewoody type colour rather than anything else. There's a fly going around my room, which is really, really annoying me at this moment. I want to just get it. But yeah, this beer itself is a nice dark sort of mahogany colour. This one, you can see there's a half finger of a frothy, I would say kind of medium beige head on this one. One or two big bubbles sticking towards the side of the glass, and a few little ones just heading up towards the bottom of the head there. But overall it looks pretty nice, and the colour of this one, like I said, is very, very similar to what you would expect of a regular Scotch ale. If I put my fingers behind the glass, this beer is kind of hazy to a good degree, but to me, the colour of this one, it's actually quite a nice ruby mahogany colour, almost chestnutty if you hold it up to the light. So to me, the colour of this one is much more akin to a Scotch ale actually. So let's take a look at the aroma and just see how we get on with this one then. Yeah, with this beer then, it's actually quite a mild aroma. You can definitely pick up a nice little bit of a brown bready quality in there. You can smell the English malts in this. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a bit of Maris Otter in here, to be honest with you. Some nice brown bread, a little bit of a woody quality to this one as well. it's a little bit kind of like bread and butter. It definitely has a little bit of that butter scotchy quality to it, which is kind of interesting. But yeah, brown bread, definitely a little bit of a grainy quality to this one as well. Some caramelly notes, a little bit of butterscotch, a little bit of biscuit in there. As I said, the mild ale, the English mild, is, you know, it is usually quite a malt forward style. On the hoppy side of things, I mean, you can pick up a little bit of a sort of herbal, vegetal kind of thing in there. There's maybe a little touch of earthiness, some kind of grassy quality to the beer as well. A little bit of a red fruity note to this one, you know, maybe some figs, maybe a little bit of a kind of candied strawberry or something like that. So yeah, there is a little touch of sharpness to the fruity side of this beer too. It's the fruity side of this one is actually quite rounded and really quite sharp, so just be aware of that when you have a smell of this beer. But you know, overall it's quite an interesting one, that, and I don't think I've, as I say, the Scottish mild ale, not something I've come across before. I've tried a few 50 shillings and 40 shillings and stuff like that, but they don't really smell too much like this. This to me does smell like a kind of classic English mild, so I'm not sure where the Scottish element comes into this one, I have to say. But let's have a taste of this beer then and just see how we get on. As I always say, when take a smell of the beer, enjoy the aroma. That's always half the experience when it comes to these different craft beers. So this one is the Highland Diet, sold in Sweden through Systembolaget as the Highland, coming in at 4.5%, brewed by Andreas Hugfeldt in the 2018 Norwegian Homebrewing Championships. Let's get stuck in. Stanja, skål. Yeah, what I would say straight away about this one is that's an English mild. I mean, the Scottish, if you compare this to the Scottish traditional beers, the shilling system that I've talked about a number of times on the channel, the shilling system, basically the lower the number, the lower the malt content and thus the alcohol content of the beer was. To me, this beer, the way that the graininess comes out in this one is more along the lines of an English mild. There is a little bit of that roasty, toasty quality in this one that you would expect of a Scottish beer. There is a sort of Scottish element to it that leans a little bit towards like a 50 shilling or something like that. But to me, this is an English mild. It's not. It doesn't show enough of the Scottish side of things, the traditional Scottish ales in my mind, I have to say. But that said, it is a pretty nice beer. If I was comparing this to English milds generally, it is a pretty good one. As I say, the confusing thing for me is where the Scottish connection comes in. But we'll get past the branding of the beer if you like, and we'll focus on what it actually is. I think that is that's the progressive way forward here. But with this beer, straight away you're going to feel a nice little bit of that toasty, roasted malt in there. It's almost a little bit like a black, I think there is a little touch of a black malt in here. And normally that's, I think, the thing that sets this apart from being a Scottish beer. You wouldn't really get black malt in the same way in Scotland as you would in England. The Scottish beers would have a grainy quality to them, but they wouldn't have that kind of black maltish quality to them in my mind. So straight away you're going to feel there is a little touch of black malt just across the middle of your palate there with this one. And that sort of dominates the flavour all the way through. As your middle of your palate kind of dries out, you can feel that just sitting there. There is a good bit of brown sugar to this beer, and this is where it starts to lean a little bit more in towards the kind of 50, 60 shilling category actually. And in fairness, one of the things you could say about this beer is that it does come across as perhaps in the flavour as being a little bit more boozy than it actually is. So yeah, for me, you've got a little bit of that black malt under there, just kind of forming the roasty part of the beer. In the middle of your or on top of that, you can really feel this sort of brown bready quality, and it is like a kind of slightly well-fired bread crust, if you like. That's what really dominates the middle of your palate. The further you go into the taste, it begins to sweeten up a little bit and becomes a little bit more brown bready. In the very centre of your palate, you've got a little bit more of a kind of syrupy caramel quality to this one. It's quite a toasty caramel, in fact. The further you go into the aftertaste, the middle of your palate does kind of dry up a little bit, and you start to get this more kind of caramelly quality out of the beer. In the very centre of your palate there's a little touch of a biscuity note to this one, but the brown sugars in this beer really do lean towards that more kind of toasty, almost treacly molasses kind of thing actually, but it's quite a well fired brown sugar that comes out of the centre of your palate in this one. For me, as I said, the thing that really sets this one apart a little bit from some of the other Scottish beers, if you like, is that the sort of well fired notes in this one, the black malts in this are just what set it apart. Apart from that, I can see where the Scottish side of things come from, but the roasty black malts in this is what makes it lean a little bit more towards the English mild, because the Scottish 50 shillings would be a little bit more brown sugary, and it is a well fired brown sugar. I've talked about that in my American Scotch ale reviews, how the American ones are a little bit more sweet, but the Scottish ones are a little bit more roasty and toasty, and it does have that element to it. But to me, if I was blind tasting this, I would think it was an English mild rather than a Scottish 50, maybe 60 shilling. I think in terms of its alcohol content, this one would fit in probably to probably into the 50 shilling category, I would think. But that said, we can talk about styles of beer all day. What I will say is that this is a solid beer, and I quite like that. And I'm not a great fan of the kind of traditional. I like my Scotch ales obviously, but I've never been a great fan of the English traditional beers. The English mild, it is an interesting one if it's done properly, and this one is quite nice, but when it comes to English traditional beer, I was always far more into porters and stouts and things like that than I was the mild ales and the golden ales and stuff like that. But this is a nice enough beer, this one. In terms of the hoppy side of the beer then, back corners of the palate, you've got a nice little bit of earthiness in there. I wouldn't be surprised actually if this beer has like Kent Goldings or Fugels in it, because the earthiness in the beer is quite strong and pronounced, and those are the two hops that you would use to get that. As you come further forward along the sides of the palate, it's a little bit more kind of herbal, if you like, and then at the very front corners of the palate there's a little touch of the floral quality there, and then round the very front curve of the tongue it's a little bit more kind of grassy, if you like, and then behind the front curve of the palate, that's where you get that little oily bubble where those juicy fruity esters start to push their way out of the beer. So for me, fruity side of this beer then, there is a little bit of a kind of raisiny sharpness to this one initially. I don't know if it's quite plums, but definitely raisins, a little bit of a figgy quality there, and then definitely some sort of strawberry, blackberry kind of flavours the further you go into the aftertaste. The thing that really lingers in the aftertaste for me with this one is that sort of toasty malt in there, some of the brown sugars, and the grainy side of the beer. A little bit of the floral herbal kind of thing is in there as well, which is really nice. But overall, it's an interesting beer, this one. In terms of the style designation of this one, I don't quite agree that this is a Scottish mild ale. There are some elements of it that might make it be a 50 shilling, but to me, the roastiness, the darkness of this beer, and particularly the black malty elements, really make it lean a little bit more towards a kind of English mild. But it's an interesting beer. It was cool to try, and it is cool to see a Norwegian brewer sort of want to bring the Scotch ales into Norway. I don't think I've ever tried a Norwegian brewed Scotch ale before, so that would definitely be an interesting thing going forward. But an interesting beer, this one, the Highland Diet from Nøgne Ø, brewed by Andreas Hugfeldt originally in the 2018 Norwegian Homebrewing Championship. So cool that we were able to get this beer in Sweden. I'd be curious to know what the Systembolaget reasons were for removing diet from the name of this one. But it's an interesting beer, this one. If you get the chance to try it, have a go at it for yourself and just see what you think. If you like the English milds, I think you will enjoy this one. It's a little bit different from the traditional Scotch ales, in my opinion. But yeah, let's leave it at that for this one. So the Highland Diet, from Nøgne Ø in Grimstad in Norway. An interesting beer, and I'm glad I was able to review it for you. So until the next time, Slange just now. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comments section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Nøgne Ø as well. If you are watching up in Norway, do give me some breweries that you would like to see me review. Hopefully I can get back to Norway at some point in the fairly near future. But thank you again for watching. Make sure you check out my social media. Do consider subscribing to the channel, and I will catch you guys later. The Highland diet from Nøgne Ø in Grimstad in Norway. Slange, skål. Cheers to Andreas Hugfeldt for a nice beer. Cheers.